Well, howdy there, Internet people. It's Bo again. So today, we're going to talk about over there. We're going to talk about over there. We haven't checked in on what's happening there in a while. So we're going to take a look at it because something happened this week that was kind of unexpected. If you remember the coverage when all of this was fresh and new and everybody was paying attention to it because the United States was involved, two things that I kept repeating so often that I'm certain people got tired of hearing it was that the Biden foreign policy, what he wanted was to create three poles of power in the region, and that Iran coming out was critical to that. Iran becoming a regional player and being accepted by the international community, that had to happen in order for his foreign policy to succeed, right? And from the U.S. standpoint, that really hinged on the nuclear deal. The other thing that I repeated myself on frequently was that the only thing that was going to stop Afghanistan from devolving into the situation it devolved into was a token security force to take over after the United States withdrew. Most times I said a regional token security force. So this week in Tehran, representatives from countries all over the region, all over the bloc immediately surrounding Afghanistan, they all met in Iran under Iran's auspices, becoming that regional player. So important that President Raisi himself was going to be there, and then they had the cyber thing, so the vice president showed up instead. And they had Russia and China on the phone, well, on the webcam. That's a big deal. That is Iran becoming that regional player. It's not under U.S. auspices, but it doesn't really matter. From the foreign policy standpoint, in order for it to succeed and create a more stable Middle East that would allow the United States to deprioritize and get out, and for there to be less war, it doesn't really matter if Iran is coming out under the United States. If they're coming out with their help, that it would be nice for U.S. interests, but it's not a requirement for the overall scheme to work. And the subject of this meeting was to figure out what to do with Afghanistan. Now, at this point, it doesn't seem as though they're looking to put in a regional token security force. But the goal is to establish a more inclusive government in Afghanistan. The goal is to kind of pressure the new government into becoming more inclusive. Now, if you are part of a Western human rights group or this is a cause that's important to you, don't get your hopes up. It's not going to be anything near what you're hoping for. Just slightly better than what exists. And if you don't know, it's not going well there. It's not getting a lot of coverage because the U.S. is gone, and people tend to forget about things when the U.S. isn't directly involved here. So, it appears that Iran is coming out in its own way, more under the auspices of China and Russia. And one of their first tasks is trying to stabilize Afghanistan. This is good. This is good. Now, I'm sure that there are some people who are going to be upset because they're coming out under Russia and China, is how it appears. When you're talking about foreign policy and you're talking about international affairs, when you're talking about trying to keep the peace and trying to avoid war, nationalism is politics for basic people. Okay, just forget about that. It doesn't matter who they come out under. All that matters is that they do. Now, I'm sure somebody is going to try to give Biden credit for this. No. This isn't a case of the Biden administration playing that international poker game where everybody is cheating. It's not them playing it well. It's them going bust, getting up from the table, walking away, tripping, and finding a few extra chips. This wasn't a success from the Biden administration. It just turns out that it may accomplish the same things. It's too early to tell how successful they're going to be, either in stabilizing Afghanistan or bringing Iran out and hopefully stabilizing a lot of the Middle East. However, this appears to be pretty organic, which is much better than a major power kind of forcing it to happen. I mean, not just from the whole self-determination and idealism standpoint, but also from the idea that it's more likely to work if they're not being pressured into it. And it doesn't appear that they are being pressured into it. It appears that they see the vacuum and they realize that it is good for them too. Without the U.S. presence there, without the presence of the same entity responsible for a 20-year-long occupation, it may be easier for a lot of this stuff to happen. Now, it's not going to happen under the U.S., but it doesn't matter. Not really. Not if the goal is to avoid conflict. It's too early to tell for certain what's going to happen. But the moves that are being made make it worth watching, make it worth paying attention to, because this is the kind of information that can help you get that crystal ball thing going. If this occurs, if this is successful, if Iran attempts to lead the way in stabilizing Afghanistan and succeeds, they're going to be much more likely to pursue that stronger regional role that is accepted by the international community. So, again, this is more of a sign of things that might come rather than a sign of things that will. But it's interesting enough to mention, and it's definitely something we should keep an eye on. Anyway, it's just a thought. Y'all have a good day.